Hey, welcome to episode 217 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and to start off, I don't usually do this, but I want to read you a quote that my guest today wrote in one of his books. He said Marty was living proof that you don't need money, power, or a title to make a difference in life. You just need to care. I'll say it again, it's so important. So the man my guest today wrote about, he said of this man, Marty was living proof that you don't need money, power, or a title to make a difference in life. You just need to care. And the book my guest today wrote about this man, Marty, is entitled "The Richest Man in Town," which makes me think of a quick story my grandpa Francis once saw in the newspaper and loved to tell. He said that the story goes that two men were sitting at the bus stop, and Harrison goes, "Hey, Mike goes, I'm richer. I'm richer than Phillips," and Mike goes, "Harrison, that's impossible. Phillips is a multi-millionaire. We work at the plant down the street." But Harrison goes, Mike goes, "What you don't get is that I have enough. I have enough. I'm the richest man because I have enough." And Phillips is worried about making his next million and always getting more and more. Anyway, this is the context I want to start us off with. And I'll tell you more about our guest today, but first this.
Today's guest, V.J. Smith.
Let me tell you more about V.J. Besides being an author and giving over, get this, 2,500 presentations in his 20-year career as a professional speaker, V.J. was an administrator at a college, spent time in corporate America, and somewhere in that found the time to become a South Dakota state senator. And also, of course, he wrote the book I quoted from above. And the book's entitled "The Richest Man in Town." Please welcome to the podcast, V.J. Smith.
Woo! Hi, Jason.
Hi, V.J. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So you've lived in a small state. You've lived in South Dakota most of your life. What does South Dakota mean to you?
Well, I was just telling someone yesterday, I was speaking to his corporate group via Zoom. They're in Minneapolis, and I love the values of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, stretching into Wyoming and Montana. and certain values that we hold dear, and we like to know our neighbors. I lived in a large city for 10 years of my life, and you didn't care to know your neighbors. But you like to know your neighbors. You like to go to the grocery store and spend extra time because there are so many people to meet. And I love to go to the post office. People hate to go to the post office. I love to go to the post office because I get to talk to people. And so this feeling of being home is not just confined to Brookings, South Dakota, where I live now. It's for a larger area. And the first question I always ask someone is, where are you from? And I get a sense of where they are because I've been in their town probably. I've talked in their town, talked in their school, whatever it might be. So I love the values, and here people tell you something, you pretty much go with it. You know it's truth, and I like to live in a truthful place.
You were born in the town of Erie. Oh, you grew up in the town of Eureka, South Dakota. Were you born there?
Yes, I was a few years ago. I was born in Eureka. At the time of my birth, I had 2 brothers and a sister, and 4 other siblings would come along later. There were 8 children.
Wow.
My dad was an attorney in that town, and the town was only 1,500 people at the time. It's much smaller now, but I'm glad I got to grow up there. I'm not only for the family that I had, but for my extended family that helped mold me, shape me. And I mean, frankly, I grew up with members of the greatest generation, the World War II, the people who got out of a Great Depression, won a world war, and they came home and had us. And they shaped my childhood. And I'm grateful for it because they helped make me what I am today.
What kind of things do you think you learned from being immersed in living around people from the greatest generation?
What things did I learn?
Yeah, from people who have been through the Depression and through World War II.
You know, that's a great question. And here's my answer to that question. They defeated a Great Depression by looking out for their neighbors. They got involved with people's lives. They went off and won a world war working as a team. They did. They worked together. It wasn't a sense of I'm independent and I can do whatever I want. No, there's a greater good to be served here. They come back from the war and they built communities. I know when I was a kid, it seemed like every adult that I knew was involved in some type of organization, whether it was the PTA, the Lions Club, the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign War. They were all involved, stepping outside their comfort zone and helping develop, especially the youth programs. And so what I learned from them is you need to make yourself useful to your neighbors. That's how this thing works. And they gave us gifts. They did, not physical gifts, but they gave us gifts of how to live our lives. And now, unfortunately, most of them are gone now. But I have my memories, and they will stay with me till I'm gone.
And as a professional speaker and author, you are able to pass some of the wisdom on to like a huge number of people, which is amazing.
I appreciate the observation, Jason. I do. I hope I'm instilling what I learned with people in my audiences. You know, I've talked to over 1 million people in the last.
You've talked to how many?
Over 1 million.
Over 1 million. Wow.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm surprised by it too. I'm grateful for it, but of that number, close to 500,000 happen to be young people, middle school, high school students. I've been in more than 500 schools the last 20 years, all over the country. And I was just in a school in Minnesota here a couple of weeks ago. There are 400 students in that audience, And I shared this story about a little guy that came, you referenced him earlier, Marty, the guy I wrote the book about. And I share his story, but I also share the importance of gratitude and what that does in your life to be grateful. Not only helping that person that you extended some kindness to, but what it does for you self-esteem. And you think that's an old message? No. Those kids just sit there and they just look at you, and you can see the emotion in their faces. And it's no longer the 69-year-old old guy on the stage. I am listening to someone who has a message that's timeless. And if it comes out of my grandfather's mouth, in other words, me, they get it because they have to pay attention to their grandfather. That's a rule. And that's how I feel when I'm on stages, especially with young people. And of course, I talk to a lot of corporations, organizations, and it's the same message. You said the 3,500 talks. Yeah, I'm giving that the Marty talk 3,500 times, and it doesn't change much from when I started doing it in the year 2000, 2001, excuse me, to what it is now. The basic structure is there, and obviously it must be okay because I keep getting asked, and then 10 years later, somebody from the same place will say, "Hey, come back and talk." Please come back and talk for us. I'll give you a good example. 3rd of January, I'm going to be at in the middle school in Madison, South Dakota. I seem to go there every 3-4 years. And the reason why is because the students read the book. They're reading it right now. And I'll come in and I'll talk. And then the book becomes real to them. Here's the guy that wrote this book. And he was a friend of Marty. And so it's just a special deal all the way around. I get emotional when I get introduced to these kids because they've read the story, and I can see the look of anticipation on their faces. I get pretty emotional in that moment. And it's hard for me to start talking because I see it in their faces. And so, again, I'm grateful.
So, young people these days, they frankly get a lot of press that's not that favorable. So, would you please tell me and tell everyone listening about young people as you see them, about the hope you see in them, about the dreams?
Well, again, a great question. And here's my observation, because I hear people constantly tell me that one generation versus another, they don't have the same skills, they don't have the same values, they don't have this, they don't have that. It's been my observation is that these young people today are not that much different from when we were younger. They aren't. As a collective body, they are not. I feel sorry for people who determine their value based on how many likes they get in terms of whatever platform they're using, and they feel useful if they get it to a certain amount, because you don't know those people, and they really don't know you. But again, I'll go back to the type of young people that I meet. When I get done talking, invariably it happens all the time, and it's just a matter of the numbers. When I get done speaking about this very simple idea of being grateful in your life and how Marty's impact on me, and I turn around and talk about his impact, how it influences them, and they come to me when I am done speaking. The lines are just, I'm just surprised by it. And because some of these kids out there in that audience, they have things going on in their lives and their family lives that aren't good. And I acknowledge that fact when I speak. I look at them all and say, I know for some of you, things aren't so good at home. And I see the nods. I see the nods, the kids, because they aren't going to come to school and going to share, my dad's doing this or my mother's doing that. They're just not going to share. But inside, they're being torn apart by what they're experiencing. And all of a sudden, this old guy stands on the stage acknowledges that and tells a story about how they can change their lives by gratitude, by even though you're going through these struggles, and if you're grateful for this and grateful for that, extend that, how it impacts your life. And it opens them up. And the next thing I know, they're on the stage, or if I'm not on the stage at that moment, there's a line. The kids, they want to shake your hands. I can't tell you the tens of thousands of hugs that I have received from young people. Or someone will stop you. One of the children will stop you. One of the kids will stop you, and they will tell you a little bit about what's going on in their life. They may have just lost a parent or grandparent, may have lost a friend. They're hurting. And then you open them up emotionally, and they tell you that now they feel a connection to you. And it's a very special place to be, Jason. It really is, that they would approach me. Because I said to so many kids when they come up to me and say, I'll bet you never thought you'd be hugging the speaker today. And they laugh. And it's true. But hey, that's the way it is. I'm grateful for all of it.
Wow. So at this point, please tell me more about a central character that we've been talking about.
Okay.
Tell me, first of all, tell me about the first time you were aware of this man named Marty.
Okay. Like many people, our first experience, you really, maybe I missed conversation before that, but you're in this line for the first time because you're buying something. As one young kid in Brandon, South Dakota said to me, everybody goes to Walmart. And so I'm at Walmart like all these other people. And I find myself in his line. It was by accident. You just choose a line. And you start watching what he's doing, how he's having these conversations with people, not long conversations, short conversations. He's intent with these people. He runs your, does his magic with running the purchases, tells you how much you owe. At that time, we were using a lot of money rather than credit cards like we do so much today. But you give him the money, he takes the money, go to the cash register, types in the amount, and drawer would pop open. He'd grab your change, grab the receipt, shut the drawer. But instead of dumping the money across to you on the counter like happens in any other place, Marty would walk all the way around the corner, and the next thing you know, he'd be standing right beside you. And I got to tell you, that first time it's kind of scary. You never had that happen before. And he'd put out his right hand, and you put out your right hand, and you locked on, and he'd look at you square in the eye and say, I sure want to thank you for shopping here today. And you have a great day. Bye. And he'd pat your hand. It was just...
So he walked around to you and shook your hand. Yes. As he gave you your change and thanked you for being there.
Yeah, it was just that extra step. I'd never seen that before. And you walk away from there and say, who was that guy? And then you started to notice, a week, 2 weeks, a month goes by, you're back in the store, and you notice that his line was always the longest in the store. And people didn't mind waiting 5-10 extra minutes because it was their moment with Marty. And
it was their moment with Marty.
Yeah. Wow. It was just a fascinating thing to watch. And then you become aware that other people are talking about this guy. He was referred to as the cute little guy at Walmart that shakes hands. Well, everybody knew who that was. The cute little guy at Walmart that shakes hands. And so I observed this. And every time I'm in his line, and I always said to myself, I need to write a letter, or someone needs to write a letter to corporate headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, and tell them about this guy. Someone needs to do that. And this little voice in the back of my head, my conscience would say, well, you're someone, why don't you? And I always had the same answer. And I say to people all the time, does it sound familiar? You say, I'm too busy. Let someone else write the letter, but I'm too busy. But that all changed on March 23rd of the year 2000. That was a life-defining moment that day. And if you want me to share it, I will.
Yeah, please.
Well, it was on that day I was in his line, and there was a young mother in front of me. She had two little boys. I suppose they were 2 and 4 years old. And before she got up to Marty, she turned to me and she said, "You know this guy right here?" She says, "He's everybody's grandpa." And I thought, what a great description. And so Marty scanned Mom's purchases. Mom pulled a checkbook out of her purse. She started writing the check. And Marty, rather than ignoring those two little boys, he walked all the way around the corner and dropped to his 72-year-old knees and started talking to those boys. And he pulled out candy. We gave them candy. You know, they're sucking on the candy. And finally, Mom pulled the check out of the checkbook, handed it to him. He grabs the counter, pulled himself up, grabs the check, goes over the cash register, grabs Mom's receipt, comes flying around. He shakes Mom's hand. And then before those boys left that store, he bent down and he picked up each one of those boys and hugged them. And the family didn't walk out of that store that day. They floated. That simple gesture of appreciation had made the whole family happy. And that broke me. I couldn't take it anymore. So I went over to the service counter and talked to the manager, asked him for the name and the address of the chief executive officer of Walmart. And he gave it to me. And I wrote a letter that changed everything.
So I hear you talking a lot about going above and beyond what is expected. Definitely Marty was going above and beyond. None of what you just described. Very little of what you just described was in his job description.
You're right. And I believe, and have always believed, that, you know, I served as a supervisor of people for 25 years of my life. And then people say, well, you know, what defines an exceptional employee? Well, an exceptional employee is someone who always is willing to take an extra step. Always, whether the step is large, whether the step is small, they take one more step or 2 steps, 5 steps, whatever it might be. And that's what Marty did. You know, he did something none of us had ever seen before. For him, he was really coming to us and appreciating us and showing us that he was genuine. And it bought our loyalty, the extra steps. And that's why he knew, because, you know, they keep track of all this information. He had 220 people a day go through his line, 220 people a day to take care of and make everyone in the group feel special and appreciated. But he really was proud of the fact that he had the highest IPH, items per hour, in the store.
The highest what?
Percentage, the highest number of people, you know, when he runs a scanner, items per hour.
Items per hour.
He was proud of the fact. He told me one time, said, "I like to show him what an old man can do," and so he'd just be, doing all this, and he was proud of it, and he attracted such a following. And the sad thing now is, Jason, Marty's been gone for a while. Sad thing is that so many people have come up to me since the book came out and said, I'm disappointed in myself because I would see his line was long and I always avoided him because I didn't want to take the extra time. And I'm disappointed with myself that I didn't go through his line at least once to experience it. And so anyway, regrets.
It's worth re-emphasizing that Marty was now working at a Ritz-Carlton or at a Mercedes-Benz dealership. He was working at a Walmart in a fairly small town, and he wasn't getting commission if he treated customers better. So what do you think Marty's motivated? What inspired him to act the way he did?
Well, first of all, in his mind, to have that many people in his line, he knew he was doing something right. And in the end, we all have to live with ourselves. And he went home dead tired every day. He'd work his shift and go home dead tired. But as he told me, I can't wait to get back to my people in the morning. Excited to wake up early. Always showed up 15, 20 minutes before he had to, because his interaction with people turned him on. He just couldn't believe that people kept coming to his line. And again, it was all genuine. It wasn't something that, some faddish thing or something that, he was putting on a great act. He was genuine. And he was fortunate enough to find a job that really had him going. It was, and you said the deal about no commission. Yeah, there weren't any commissions. That what he was doing. He was getting paid as much as the checker in the next line was getting paid. But he took great delight that he had these. Look at these people. We called ourselves groupies. Marty groupies, and there were thousands of us.
Marty groupies.
Yeah. And the thing is that Marty's been gone for 20 years, and it's amazing to me how many people will come up to me all these years later and tell me how proud they were to have gone through his line, or tell me a story about how he treated them in his line. And you think about all the people in this life that have important titles, that people who are important or believe they're important for the now, and you can't remember them. You can't remember what they did, who they were, and all the other stuff. Here was a guy who worked at a checkout stand at Walmart, and it's just remarkable. And it just shows you the impact that we have in a place you'd never expect. But if you do your job and do it well, and care about people, and show that you care about people, it makes all the difference in the world.
So it occurs to me that the reason you wrote that letter to Walmart corporate, the reason you finally said, well, I'm someone, why don't I do it, was not because Marty was giving you wonderful, he was giving you great service, but that's not what inspired your action. Your action was inspired because he was kind to mom and kids that you didn't know. You were inspired by his kindness towards people you didn't know.
And that was a beautiful thing, because it didn't matter what you looked like, your age, what you were buying. It didn't matter. You were in his line and you were somebody to him. And everybody gravitated toward that. And I wrote in the book, there were a couple of women in Brookings that would buy nothing. They would come out and all of a sudden they'd appear in his line, and the only thing he wanted was a hug. And it's pretty obvious to Marty that they probably didn't have anybody in their lives that they felt bonded to. They would just come out to hug him, and then they would leave having bought nothing. And it that was the thing that probably got me the most, was all the people that he was impacting, and people would talk about it. You'd hear people talking around town about this guy. And people had a choice at that time to go to Kmart, which was right beside Walmart, and Walmart. And they would take Walmart because they wanted to go see their friend Marty. And Marty didn't know their names. For the most part, he didn't know their names. It didn't matter to him. You were a somebody if you were in his line, and he made you feel like a somebody.
So you worked up what you needed to do to take the 20 minutes to write this letter, and then you sent it off. Did you expect any response from it at all?
I really don't know what I was expecting. But here was the deal, because I've reflected on this a lot the last 25 years. I did accidentally what he was doing. As I said, Marty would take the extra step and to go around that counter and shake people's hand, give them their change, whatever it might be. And he pushed me, again, it was an accident, to take an extra step by writing that letter to corporate headquarters and extolling his virtues. That's basically what happened. I wasn't looking for anything for me at all. I just wanted the people in Bentonville, Arkansas at headquarters to know about this guy that the townspeople were talking about. Even the college students were going to his line all the time. It was fascinating to see. And so as I look back at it now, that letter that took me 20 minutes to write changed two people's lives. It changed his life and it changed my life. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if that moment hadn't happened. And it just reminds me that all of us have the opportunity to share with someone, whether it's verbally or whether it's in the written form, about the importance, how important they are in their lives, how that's just life-changing stuff. And people need to have the courage to share with people what they feel about those people. And in this case, it was reinforced when I wrote the letter to the head of Walmart at the time. And I've been on this journey since March of 2001, sharing that story with people.
So you wrote this letter and sent it off. How did you know? What was your next indication that they had gotten the letter and done something with it?
Well, okay, and I appreciate you taking me back to that, Jason. What happened was,
it's amazing.
Yeah, what happened that same day that I wrote this letter, a college student by name Casey Estling came into my office. Casey was an all-conference forward on our men's basketball team, but he was a better student than an athlete. He was from the town of Center Point, Iowa. And he said the university wants him to give the graduation speech that year. And that would have been May of the year 2000. He said, would you help me? And I said, sure. I said, what do you want to talk about? He said, well, I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about people I have met here in Brookings, people here at the university who have had an important impact on my life and what they've taught me. I said, great idea. Go home this weekend, make a list of 8 to 10 people and how they've impacted your life. And you come back here on Monday, we'll talk about it. And he leaves. And when Monday afternoon shows up, he comes into my office, sits down in the chair across my desk, pulls a piece of paper out of his pocket. It's his list. And he said, I got it. I said, what do you got? And the first thing out of his mouth was, there's this guy at Walmart, the name of Marty. I couldn't believe what he said. He could have picked out his basketball coach that recruited him, gave him a full ride scholarship. He could have picked out some professor at the university. No, he picked out a cashier at Walmart who wasn't charging tuition, but he was teaching to everybody who came through his line about what it means to be appreciated. I reached in my in basket. I pulled out the copy of the letter that I'd sent to David Glass, the big coon of Walmart, a few days before that. And I threw it over to Casey. I said, read this. And he looked at me after he read it. He said, that guy's having an impact on a lot of people's lives, didn't he? I said, yeah. Well, about 10 days later, Casey walked into my office. He's standing by the corner of my desk. He's got a big grin on his face. And he says, Marty wants to meet you. I said, why? He said, well, I was in his line yesterday. He asked me if I knew who you were. I said I did. Evidently, that letter you sent has now come back in the chain of command all the way from Bentonville, Arkansas to Brookings, because they pulled first shift employees together yesterday morning. They read your letter and everybody cheered for Marty. And now he wants to meet you. Well, what do? What do you just come up to him and say hi? So I went out, got in line. I got some golf balls and golf tees. And got in line, and
I love that you remember what you bought.
Oh yeah, golf balls and golf tees. It was a profound moment, and so he rang up the purchase. He said, that'll be $21.16. Well, I pulled out a check blank out of my wallet that obviously had my name printed on it. So the plot thickens. I write the check, I hand it to him, takes the check, he goes over to the cash register, starts typing the amount, and then he freezes when he sees my name. And he's just staring at my name. And he looks over at me, he looks back at the check. He backed away from the cash register, walked all the way around the counter. And the next thing I know, he's standing closer than he ever stood in my life. And he's looking up at me. I'm looking down at him. I don't have a clue what's coming next. But then he throws his arms around me. He gives me a big old bear hug, and he buries his head into my chest. And he said, I don't know who you are, but thanks for doing that. So I threw my arms around him. Just two guys hugging at Walmart. And so he said, can we get together some night for coffee? I said, I'd love to. He said, how about Thursday night, 7:00? I said, I'm open. He said, I said, where do you want to go? And he said, can we go to Hy-Vee, the grocery store? He could have picked anywhere in town, but he picked the grocery store. You know why? Because he felt comfortable there, and coffee didn't cost a whole lot of money there. So I showed up at Hy-Vee on that Thursday night with a notebook and pencil, and we sat for an hour and a half, and he talked and I wrote, and that was the basic start to a relationship that we had for the next 4 years.
So how did you know that you wanted to bring a notebook and a pencil to the grocery store that day?
Well, I brought the notebook and pencil.
But how did you know that you wanted to bring it? Well, why was it important? I mean, we all have lots of conversations that we don't take notes on.
Probably because I knew instinctively that there was a bigger story here. I want to know, of all the cashiers, the tens of thousands of cashiers I ever saw in my life, why was this guy so different? Why? And all these people are talking about him. Why? What made him go? I had no idea that I was going to give a speech about his life. I had no idea I was going to write a book about him. The only thing I knew is that I had to learn something, and I wanted to know his background, and that's where it started. And we had many nights, not at Hy-Vee, but at his home. He lived in a trailer, a double wide trailer, and I just knew that he was so special. And the other part about it is that he was so sincere. At first night at Hy-Vee, and he probably broke out into tears 4, 5, 6 times when he started talking about his life as a youngster, and then young adulthood, his time at World War II. You could just see the heart just pouring out of him. It was something.
So at the point when you wrote the letter to Walmart about Marty, were you a professional speaker at that point?
Well, yeah, I guess you could call me a professional speaker. I would consider myself at that time a semi-professional speaker because I was just starting. 1998 was the first time I ever was compensated for giving a talk. It was in a church basement, and when I got done, they handed me a brown bag, and in that brown bag happened to be $25 in sausage. So the first time I got paid for speaking was I got paid in sausage. And but I have to tell you, when I drove back home that night, that bag was sitting right beside me on the passenger seat. I looked at it and I thought, wow, I talked and I got something of value for speaking. And so I dabbled a little bit, but again, I did.
So back up. What was the circumstance that had you speaking at that church? Did you reach out to them? Or?
No, they asked me. What happened was when I lived in Kansas City in 1988, the company I worked for, Allied Signal Aerospace Company, they were big with the Toastmasters program. Toastmasters is a group, an organization to improve your communication skills, both speaking and listening. And I was fascinated by that. And then a year later, I realized they had competitions and you could win trophies. And I thought, hey, I like to win trophies. And so
hey, I like to win trophies.
Yeah. So I got involved with it, and I did okay. And the first time I tried out, you get up to a certain level and you lose and you go back down. Well, when I moved back to South Dakota in 1981, 1990, but in 81, I joined the Toastmasters group in Brookings. And so twice in 1994 and 1996, I was one of 9 final contestants in the organization's World Championship of Public Speaking. The first was Louisville, Kentucky, and the other time was in St. Louis. And you know, you give a 7-minute speech and you try to do the best you can. You're in front of 2,500 people. It's a live audience. You turn around and you look, there's a huge screen and you're on the huge screen. It scares you. But in 1996, of course, then it got, especially in 1996, it was in the newspapers, the Argus Leader in Sioux Falls, and all this other. Well, it drew the interest of people that bring in speakers. And so people were reaching out to me, and I didn't have a website. I just had a phone number in the phone book. And they would ask me. And so I crafted a speech called Simple Choices, Big Rewards. That's what I was giving. It was about 50 minutes long. And people were saying, hey, would you give this speech in Pierre, Aberdeen, Rapid City? And I did, but I wasn't doing it a lot. I probably only about 30 times a year, maybe 40, because I was still the alumni director at South Dakota State University, and that was my priority, was to be the alumni director. And then, but everything changed in 2001, because as soon as I started talking about Marty, and the speech titled it The Richest Man in Town right out of the gate, and would share his story, then things changed. I was going to a lot of places, but then when the book hit in 2005, oh my goodness, I look back at that time and I think, how did I survive? Because I was doing a full-time job and I was doing 100 presentations a year. And then the book really got legs, national legs, and I knew I had to quit. I had to quit being the alumni director at South Dakota State because I couldn't serve 2 masters, and I had to decide the prettiest girl to take to the dance, and I chose to share Marty's story, and I've been on the road ever since.
So we're jumping around. Oh, you don't have my just briefly. So there's thousands upon thousands of people in Toastmasters. What took you to the top of the Toastmasters competition? Do you think?
I'm gonna put Toastmasters. It was important for me to get in that organization. I wanted to improve. I didn't see myself as a professional speaker. I saw myself as a person who wanted to become a better speaker. That's what I saw myself. That's the reason why I joined. And all of a sudden you get caught up in these competitions, and I'm glad for it. But here's the deal, and I say this knowing it hurt at the time. You know, you get to be one of 9 finalists again in 94 and 96, and your name isn't called out for first, second, or third. And it hurts, because the reason why you got in the competition in the first place is because you wanted to win a trophy. It didn't matter if it's third place, you wanted to win a trophy. Well, in 1994, when we were in Louisville, a guy by the name of Morgan MacArthur, who was a veterinarian, he won. But while Morgan was speaking, everyone in that facility and all the speakers knew who was going to win. He was going to win because he just gave a phenomenal presentation called Stuck to a Bucket. Just phenomenal. And later that day, I saw him in the lobby of the hotel, and he was surrounded by his adoring fans. You know, they wanted his autograph. They wanted their pictures taken with him. I was envious. You know, I truly envious. And that's a sin to be envious, but I was envious. And so, but he wanted to leave the world of being a veterinarian and wanted to become a professional speaker. And boy, you know, we're all with Morgan. We knew he was going to do it. Well, about 8 years ago, I knew Morgan lived in Milwaukee, and I had to speak for the Wisconsin Bankers Association. So I contacted him. I said, can we have breakfast? And I was staying at the Pfister Hotel, a beautiful hotel in Milwaukee. And I said, can we have breakfast? And so I met with him at 7:00. The reason why is because I knew where I had been. I wanted to know where the champ went, what stages he stood on, and so it was devastating when he told me that it didn't work out for him, and he was back pulling calves during calving season again. It didn't work, and it just stunned me. He said I couldn't find the right message to give to people. Well, about 6 years ago, maybe 5, I was back in Louisville, Kentucky, and in the same room that we had the competition. I was speaking for a group there at the Galt House, and I took a photograph of the room and I emailed it to Morgan, and I said, "Champ, I'm at the site of your greatest victory." And he wrote an email back to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, "I got the trophy, but you won the prize." And it just resonated. And even when I said it just now, I get chills. I'm fortunate to be able to continue to do this because Marty allowed me to find him and be able to share the story, which is made for. It's been an incredible journey. That's the best way I could put it.
So you sent the letter about Marty to corporate. You guys started getting together. You realized that this is amazing. What led you to take the additional step of writing a book about your friendship?
Okay, another good question. I can't say this for sure, but I probably harbored some. First of all, one of the big moments in my life was when I turned 40 years old. I wrote down 57 things I wanted to do before I died. Okay, 57 things I wanted to do before I died. It was a profound moment. It changed everything in terms of.
Why 57?
I ran out of ideas.
Okay.
It was all the same night. It was on my 40th birthday. I felt sorry for myself. What have I done in my life and all the other stuff? And so I wrote down 57 things. Okay. The third thing I wrote on my goals list was to write a book. What book? I had no idea, but I just knew I wanted to write a book. And so that had always been in the back of my head. And at the time that Marty was on his last couple of days on Earth at Vera McKinnon in Sioux Falls, I happened to be in Mandan, North Dakota, giving his talk. And when I got done, this older gentleman came up to me and said, "You are going to write a book about this, aren't you?" And I can see him right now as I share that story and the seriousness in his face. And I drove back to Mandan thinking, I got to do that. I mean, you set it as a goal, and keep focused on that because it's an incredible amount of work to write a book. It just is. There's no kidding around about it. And in this day and age of artificial intelligence, AI, a lot of people are going to be pushing out books because they don't have to write them, or they hire ghostwriters to write them. Well, if you write a book, if you write every word practically and every paragraph on every page, you feel a tremendous sense of ownership over that product. And so, I nailed that goal. And again, it was a goal, right over right there on my wall, right there. When I finish a goal, I take a picture. And now big game hunters will shoot a deer or an elk and they'll have it mounted, hang it in their offices. Those are, and I come in here because not all the photographs, there are about 20 of them that I haven't put up yet. I feel a sense of satisfaction knowing that these things became a focus for me. The largest one in there, the one I'm pointing at right now, that's long, that's the cover of the original book, The Richest Man In Town. Because for the most part, this book allowed me to do about 30 of my goals. One thing led to another, to another, to another. And hey, we all know that photograph right there. It's the putting up the flag in Iwo Jima on February 23rd, 1945. One of the goals I wrote was to visit the graves of every guy who held that flagpole that day. And because of Marty, and being able to go to all these different places around the country. My wife and I were able to visit and pay our respects at the graves of each one of those guys holding that flag.
I'm getting reminders of how much a life can change quickly if we pay attention and take steps we feel we should take. Definitely, but I'm also getting a sense of how quickly kindness can affect not just someone else, but affect huge number of people. So this guy in Mandans, North Dakota, who came up to you after your presentation about Marty and said without seriousness, you're going to write a book about that. He had a big effect on thousands upon thousands of people just in that little moment.
It did, and it's an interesting observation you make, and it's a true one. You know, if it wasn't important by what he said, I wouldn't even bring it up. But it was such a profound statement from a stranger who obviously was moved by the story, and you think that there's something larger here that you need to act on. And I'm an early riser. I have been since I was a little kid, and so I'm normally up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so after Marty died in late April of 2004, by that October, I had figured out an outline to put together the book, and started every morning. There I am on the computer typing. And some days I get nothing out of that, my thinking. And other days I'd write a page or two and cobble it together. And I'll never forget. I sent all this stuff off to an editor. This editor is a guy I met in Kansas City a long time ago. He was working out in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I sent him the copy of the last chapter. It's chapter 13. And it was a Sunday morning. He sends it back to me. I had a photograph of Marty in my office. And I read it, that last chapter. And I got to tell you, Jason, I started crying. I did. And I looked at that picture. And I said to Marty, to this photograph, I said, can you believe this? Because all that had gone into that, and in this story of this relationship the two of us had, and I'm reading about it, and the guy had done such a nice job of taking the little edges, the rough edges off. I didn't know it would get the wide appeal that it has gotten. I didn't know any of it, but I knew it had to come out in book form, so it did.
So by this point in our conversation, I'm deeply inspired. I've teared up a few times, and I'm sure people listening will be inspired. What would you suggest that listeners do with they're inspired now. What would you suggest they do with that inspiration in a few minutes when this podcast ends?
Well, my suggestion is this, is act on your good thoughts.
Act on your good thoughts.
Act on your good thoughts. I mean, it was like me saying someone ought to write a letter about this guy, and my subconscious saying, well, you're somebody, why don't you? And I finally listened to myself and act and take action. It goes back to, again, I made references to the goals, setting goals, but I think people need roadmaps in their lives, things to shoot at. I just do. I can't believe how many things that I have done simply because it become a focus, but act on your good thoughts. And it's just, and you heard me that day, Jason. I talked about one of the greatest things on my goals list, and there's a photograph up there, was the day I dropped 503 Christmas cards in the mail.
Oh, yeah.
503 Christmas cards. It was December 3rd of the year 2020. And because of the COVID year and everything got kind of shut down, I finally did goal number 49.
So during the pandemic, you could have been, woe is me, life is shut down, woe is me. Instead, you're out writing how many Christmas cards?
503. 503. But here's the deal. I didn't simply, I got the cards at the Redland Arts Center in Watertown, and they're blank. Now, I didn't say, hey, Art, Merry Christmas, sign my name. I wrote each one of these people something about why I remembered them and what they had done for me. I wanted them to know this personal connection. And when I sent those, what I got back within the next 2-3 weeks is incredible. I was just shocked. But here's the deal. Most of those people, the first thing they wrote back to me was, thank you for remembering me. And in the beginning, I'd think, of course I remember you. And then it dawned on me, why? Why would you think that? Because it's been 40, 50 years since you've communicated with these people, and you've never told them why. And out of the blue, this letter comes. And I have to tell you, 26, 27 of the people that I sent Christmas cards to 4 years ago have now died. And I have no regrets. I feel bad about losing them, but I have no regrets because I know I told them what they meant to me. I didn't want to tell the surviving relatives what they had meant to me. I told them.
You didn't want to tell the surviving relatives what they meant to you. You wanted them to know.
And I can't tell you the number of people who 4 years later will tell me I still have your Christmas card. And so it took a lot of time. My goodness, 503 cards, addresses, took a lot of money, envelopes, Christmas cards, stamps. But you talk about something I look back on that I've done in my life, and I'm really, really glad I did it. I did it. And that's acting on my good thoughts.
And it's reminiscent of the letter you took the extra step of sending corporate Walmart telling them, hey, Marty is this excellent employee.
It's exactly the same thinking. Because I realized what happened because of the letter that I had sent to David Glass, the chief executive officer of Walmart at the time. I realized what had happened. And you think about it. Now, you take that one and multiply it by 503. The impact that you can have with your words with 503 people to tell them. And it's just remarkable. And again, I could have ignored all of this. I could have just gone on with my life. But I know this. When I put my head down on the pillow at night, I'm a happy guy. And I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm a happy guy. I am, because I know words have an impact on people, and lifting them up, you lift yourself up. And that's the key. You lift yourself up. We all got to get lifted.
There's so much division right now in politics and in everything. And it occurs to me that what you're talking about is a different path, a path of appreciating each other and celebrating each other, even if we're not all the same. Marty was not the same as you. He didn't have the same career as you, but still you were able to celebrate each other. Still, you were able to change each other's lives.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We never talked politics. We talked about important things in life, families, friends, and all that. And that's another thing that I have noticed as I've gone out on the road and met with, I can't tell you the tens of thousands of conversations I've had with people. I've never met anybody out on the road in all these years who I didn't like.
You've never met anybody out on the road all these years that you didn't like.
Everybody that I have talked to, and you realize you cut through the crap of politics and get down to the basics of life. We're all pretty much the same. We are, and you shed all that other stuff, and in those moments you realize we're all human beings. We're in this together, and we got to figure out ways that we improve our relationships with everyone. Got to get along and be accepting and not judgmental and all the other stuff that we have human frailties about. And it's really been it's been quite a ride, Jason. That's all I'm gonna tell you. It's been quite a ride.
And we're getting to the very end of this conversation, but I ask all my guests this. In my work, I talk about the power of doing perfect best. What it means to me is I envision the best I want for myself and those around me and go towards it. But when I make mistakes, when uncertainties come up, instead of using those things as a reason to stop, I try to learn from those things and move forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, V.J. Smith?
Well, the biggest thing in life, it goes back to my setting the goals again. I didn't want on my last day to have regrets. And how the turmoil inside me, I didn't want any regrets, and I knew I had to do something that I would look back on, and the failure. That one of the goals was to win a trophy at Toastmasters International's World Championship for Public Speaking. That was a goal. Well, I'm never going to get it, but I got more out of losing than I did out of winning. I'll guarantee you that. So I wasn't the best, and you realize there's always going to be a better speaker. There are going to be thousands of better speakers, but you got to try. You take that step forward and the next step forward and the next step forward. When you stop taking those steps, then you're shutting yourself down for the possibilities that are beyond that. Because it's one thing I've learned. Again, it goes back to the goals, pushing myself, taking one more step makes all the difference in the world. And you don't know what form that step is going to be. For me, it was a letter. For other people, it could be doing a kind act. One of the great things, and I want to share this story. Maybe you heard this when I spoke. This whole deal of a kind act, and you don't know how the impact is going to have. But a woman, Wyndham, Minnesota, probably about 4 years ago, she's about 60 years old. She said, I got to tell you what happened 3 weeks ago at McDonald's. She says, I was with my 4-year-old granddaughter. She was in a child seat strapped behind me. And I was ordering food on the outside. And so I ordered the food, and I started to drive up to the window to pick up the food. And out of the back seat, my granddaughter said, we need to pay for the people behind us. So I stopped the car. I looked at her and I said, why would I do that? And the little girl said, because that's what mommy always does. That's what mommy always does.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine what grandma thought about her daughter? What her daughter is instilling into her granddaughter? And that's it. That's it. The little girl was learning from her mother and passing on these things. And in those moments, and so I've told this story for the last 4 years, and I see the impact it has on people. And just a reminder to all of us, random act of kindness are lifelong things, or can be lifelong things. So we have to think about people we don't even know. And again, you lift yourself up by lifting other people up. So
you have a riveting message, V.J. Smith, and you celebrate so many people. How can people who are excited to see more of your work connect with you?
Well, here's this is a full disclosure. I used to list my my speaking calendar on my website. I stopped doing that. The reason why was go to Seattle, go to Omaha, whatever it is, someone would see it, and then they would contact me and say, can I come and listen? My problem is I was contacting too many of these event organizers and say, hey, can somebody that I don't know come and listen? And it got to be really a tough deal. And so I decided not to do that anymore. I don't put out any videos, and there's reason for that. There's a group in Florida that was selling my presentation. I have no idea who they were. I had to stop that. So we don't record my presentations. And so, someone's interested to go to my website and contact me by my email address.
What's your website again?
It's www.lifesgreatmoments.com. It's not life's greatest moments. www.life's, no apostrophe, lifesgreatmoments.com. Takes you right into the website. The books are there if people want a book. My phone number's there. I just got a phone call yesterday from a guy in Lakeville, Minnesota. And he said, you answer your own phone? And I said, who answers your phone? Because I enjoy talking to people who have read the book. I just do. And anyway, my email address is on there too. Everything. So, and there's
will you look down? Did I get your website right?
That's it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, V.J. I feel uplifted, and I imagine that everyone who sees this will feel uplifted by your words and stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So, gosh, we are each so powerful, and we have so much ability to uplift ourselves and uplift the people around us. Wasn't that inspiring? And I have to tell you one more thing about V.J. V.J. I heard him speak, and I came up afterwards, and I'm like, will you be on my awkwardly awesome podcast? And he could have said, hey, Jason, thank you. Thanks for your kindness, but I'm way too busy for that. Too busy to do that. I travel the country, and instead VJs follow through, and then now we get just this inspiring hour because VJ is kind and follows through. He walks his talk. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in for another episode next week. Please comment if you want. We love comments, and thanks for all you do, and thanks for being the best you can be. Talk to you later.